Thursday. We're Thursday today, right? Y'all know I've had trouble. I've had extreme trouble keeping track of my days of the week, especially over the past 4 years. Like, COVID messed my head up. Not contracting COVID, but COVID days have just been weird for me. And it's never not going to be weird. And the world is never going to return to its pre-COVID state. So I'm just eventually going to have to start getting used to things as they are. But anyways, it's Thursday. I have an hour and a half until I'm supposed to do this interview with John and Beth. I'm a little nervous about it, to tell you the truth. I've mentioned this before. Social anxiety. And while I have gotten somewhat comfortable with interviewing others, that's because I have time to plan out and prepare for all the questions. I don't really have to worry much about their answers to my questions. I'm like, as long as I'm thoroughly prepared with my questions, they're going to say whatever they're going to say, and I'm in control. Something about anxiety is I feel like somebody with a high amount of anxiety like me feels more anxiety when I feel like I have no control over the situation. So while I do have a big trust in John Brennan to help me to feel comfortable with this conversation we're going to have, still the thoughts floating around in my head. This guy has a pretty big podcast that a lot of people listen to, I guess. Not watch, listen to, because it's a podcast. And I'm like, what am I going to bring to the table? What if he brings me something that stumps me? He or Beth. I know those are all just anxiety, because anxiety is an anticipation of things in the future that have not yet occurred, and then always thinking of worst case scenarios. So I'm sure once I get into it, I'm going to be okay. But right now, my mind is just swirling with all these different possibilities. Hi, Charicity, and hi, Marshall. You're going to do great. You know your stuff and are a great speaker. Thank you. It's funny because I had a speaking event. When was this? September, I think. It was a suicide prevention event. And my friends who came to support me at that event saw me before the event. And they were like, "Are you okay? Did you get enough sleep? Are you feeling all right?" They're like, "Slow down." I remember one of them grabbed my arm and was like, "Slow down, Mark. Breathe. You're going to be okay." For that particular thing, that was just how I look. That's just my regular way of looking prior to getting up to do any public speaking. I'm good once I actually get up there and start speaking. But the process, the things that I go through before I start speaking is probably the reason why I would have a hard time seeing myself being a full-time public speaker, despite the fact that everyone is like, "Oh, you're so talented for that." Every time I step up to do that, I feel the same way. Yeah. So yesterday I kind of went through. Actually, when John sent me the invite, he gave me a few. There's a few questions in there. I think it's a generic template that they send to everybody that they interview, and it gave me like a few things that they're gonna ask about. Music was one of them, like your favorite music and your favorite bands. It said your involvement in TV, because most of the people that they interview, with the exception of one other person, are people that they know from TV shows. So I guess my questions will be related to my YouTube page. Some interesting things that I was thinking about in relation to my YouTube page is that somebody suggested for me to listen to his interview of Mike Lewis. If you know who Mike Lewis is, there's a podcast called the Mike Lewis Podcast, and he has 200 plus interviews with different casts from, I think, predominantly The Challenge, and he said that he's done some wrestlers. He's interviewed some wrestlers within the past year. And I listened to that interview to get some ideas of what they might ask me as a podcaster. And some of the questions that they were asking him was what got him into podcasting, his favorite interviews, his favorite cast, people that he would like to see back on The Challenge, different things like that. But I guess the onus is on them to figure out the things to ask me. And my only thing is just to be my genuine, authentic self. And, hopefully there's good outcomes from that. I said this last night. Hopefully I gain some new followers. Maybe a few people come over to me from John and Beth's page. And it can only be a good thing. It can only be a good thing. Public speaking, actually, there was a time in my life, especially when I was in elementary school and high school, but more elementary school than high school, where I would prepare tremendous speeches. I was very meticulous with my preparation, with my notes, with everything. I'd practice in the mirror, all of that. And then when I would get up there in front of the class, the paper would start shaking, everything would go blurry, the room would look blurry, I would get dizzy, nauseous, and I would skip over half the things that I wrote down and prepared for, and I'd be so disappointed in myself because I would get a C or a D on the presentation. And I know it was an A presentation, but back in those days, now it's something that I know that if I was in school right now, it's something I could get a reasonable accommodation for. People tell me that reasonable accommodations existed back then, but I think that you really had to be in the know to know that. So I didn't know about reasonable accommodations, nor did I know that I had anxiety at that time. So my presentation grades were terrible because of that. What helped me was actually this communications class that I took in college, which a lot of my but a lot of my classmates at the time were like, oh, this class is just an easy A. I'm not really learning anything. That was one of the classes that I always reference to people that I got the most out of. And I'll tell you why. When we did presentations, everything was weighted. Percentage. A percentage of our grade was what we graded ourselves. A percentage of our grade was what our classmates graded us, and another percentage was what the teacher graded us. So it was weighted basically evenly between those three: self-grade, classmate grade, teacher's grade. So the teacher would actually record us. She had a video camera in the back of the class when we were doing our presentations. She would record us, and then the videotape would go to the library, and then we had to go to the library the video. And the first time I ever watched myself speak on camera, I was mortified. I'm gonna have to change the topic of this, the title of this video, because I don't even think I'm gonna talk about what I was initially going to talk about. That'll be a later video, maybe for after my interview is done. But I was mortified watching myself stand in front of the class and speak, because I honestly did not think that I was that bad. I graded myself a D. My classmates and my teacher gave me like a B minus. But I felt like, I guess we're our own worst critics. Like, imagine giving yourself a D grade for a self-evaluation. And I assume that I'm picking, because now my phone is saying LTE. But if you can hear me, please put something in the chat to let me know that you can hear me before I continue. Because I remember one time I spoke for about 7 minutes after a live cut off and cut back on. And basically it cut off again, and I went back to look at it and it wasn't there. So I'm gonna wait a minute or two and see if there's anyone who types in the chat. Thanks, Marshall. And how does it look? Is the video grainy? Even if it is, I'll continue, but I just want to know, does the video look grainy? And by the way, this cold is not helping me feel confident either. It looks fine, okay. So okay. Where are we at here? Yeah, so when I saw myself in that video, and I saw and I heard myself, and I saw my mannerisms and everything, and I was mortified. If there's one thing about me, I don't want to embarrass myself. I said to myself, I can never look at another video of myself looking like that ever again. So I remember I actually spoke to the teacher. I was like, hey, do you think I can speak to you after class? Which was not a typical thing. Oh, you're catching every few words.